This is an IDF training ground. Since 1980, the IDF has used this barren wasteland for training exercises, both of the Air Force and ground forces. Live fire drills, navigation exercises, and training of all the ground forces. So slowly but surely, the Palestinian Authority has moved into these areas because they are strategically crucial for a lot of reasons. We'll look at the map and you'll see why. And the narrative of Palestinian villages was born. These places were created with a very specific purpose. In many of them, the majority of the people living there are actually international activists. We call them anarchists. They come into Israel on tourist visas, come straight out here, take up residence, and their entire mission is to create confrontations with the Jewish communities and with the IDF, and to document when there is a response on the Israeli side. And all of that footage, and all of that footage is what was used to create the new Hollywood sensation called No Other Land. We'll talk about it at length inside. So, 16 years ago, Peace Now and B'Tselem started this project. They called it the documentation project. Project HaTi'ud. Right? They went around to all of these outposts and they put cameras. And ever since, the people that they're sending to live in these outposts, they give them cameras. And I've seen, when I drive through, and maybe it will even happen today, little Bedouin kids come running out to the car with cameras. And they have EU symbols sometimes on the side of the camera, or United Nations stickers on the camera. They all have the exact same cameras, and they come out and they photograph me. Whatever. Minutes after you drive through the firing zones there, they have a website called the Good Shepherd Collective, and I'm a star on the Good Shepherd Collective. They put up my picture and they put up confrontations with me. It's all very exciting. But the cameras were provided as a long-term strategy. What happens is all these anarchists who are there and the Palestinian activists who are there come and start confrontations with the Jewish communities, with the shepherds, or with the IDF. And when there's a response, they begin to film. They collected all of these film and they ran it together. And the star of the film is this guy, Basel Adra, who was a kid when he got his camera. And he's now an adult man, together with a guy named Yuval Avraham. Yuval Avraham is one of these far-left Israelis who joined his military service. He began in a unit called 8,200, Shmone Matayim, which is intelligence. And he went there in order to learn Arabic, which he did. The Israeli army taught him Arabic. And then he jumped ship and took up residence in Masafer Yatta, in Atuani actually, together with Basel Adra. And they created this film. He's a documentary filmmaker now. They created this film called No Other Land that shows the story of how the cruel Israeli occupation is abusing the villagers, the indigenous villagers of Masafer Yatta. Right? So the fact is that all this began after all of these villages again and again and again lost in court in their attempts to block demolition. The High Court of Justice of Israel heard the claims of these people for years, almost 20 years, of all kinds of ridiculous European-supported legal action to try to keep the Israeli army from removing them from the IDF firing zones where they had taken up residence. When they couldn't find any legal loophole anymore, they decided to resort to the next best thing, and that is to create this whole narrative of settler violence and IDF supporting the settlers in their violence. So they took all this footage from these cameras that they had been providing all these years. They strung it all together, and Basel Adra and Yuval Avraham told this heartbreaking story about all the abuse that these indigenous villagers have suffered because of the violent settlers living here. You may be one of them. So it's a violent settler. She looks very violent. So I'm sure they were here. I'm sure they were here. So these two, aside from everything else, this film has won the award at the Berlin Film Festival for Best Documentary. And now it is a candidate for Best Documentary Film at the Oscars in America.
And that's next week.
And it's on the 3rd of March. And I got wind of all of this. Now, they did a very smart thing. They did not show this film anywhere in Israel, so we could not even respond. We couldn't see it. We couldn't get our hands on it. Only after it won the award in Berlin, the website of essentially Peace Now made it available. So I can send you a link and you can see it on the Peace Now website. And it is, of course, a horror. And there are many, many things there. We have no idea what the real story was. But we know that many, many of these confrontations that they filmed were after Jewish shepherds or Jewish communities were attacked. And when the IDF was called in to respond, they began filming. That is the way that this has all been created. So knowing the damage that this film will cause if it wins Best Documentary, it first of all creates legitimacy for the film itself. Saying that it is a documentary means that it is a representation of fact. And it is not. It is a representation of a completely false narrative. And second of all, when it wins an Oscar, the surge of anti-Israel sentiment and the speech that's going to be made from the platform of the Oscar ceremony are going to be devastating for Israel on many, many levels, and will probably cause irreparable damage for generations even, and will make it even harder for the state of Israel to actually remove those illegal outposts because they are now world famous. So I turned to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and begged them to actually wake up and do something about this. Okay, it's a film, so the Ministry of Culture or whatever, but it's not an Israeli film, and it wasn't on anybody's radar, and the government really wasn't dealing with it. So I presented all of the facts, collected all of the images that we have, collected all of the legal data, collected all of the Supreme Court decisions having to do with Masafer Yatta, collected all the aerial photographs proving when and how these outposts were created, handed them all over to the Deputy Foreign Minister, who promised to create short explanatory videos to push out from the Foreign Ministry in the days leading up to the Oscars. I asked her to do it for the 2 weeks preceding the Oscars. They have not got their act together yet. I am very fearful that they will not get their act together on time. And then again, we'll be left trying to clean up the mess after the fact, and that will be extremely unfortunate. So maybe today you can tweet out things about Masafer Yatta and address the charges of No Other Land, which is what that film is called, when we go and have a look for ourselves. And I will send you a file that we created of 168 aerial photos over time, going back to the 1930s. So that no one could say, oh, when the State of Israel came in 1967, they dispossessed or erased these Arab villages. Going back all the way to the 1930s, some of them, we have images from the German Luftwaffe that took photographs from the planes, proving without a doubt that there never have been villages in these areas, that they were always a wasteland, that they were state land in the Ottoman period, in the Jordanian period, and they are state land today. And there were never any villages there. When we go and see them, you will see that it is fairly unreasonable to think that there are villages there. What they now claim is because the people are being dispossessed, they are living in the caves there are natural caves out here. So they started out the exact opposite, actually. They said the land is theirs because they always lived in the caves, and that was their traditional way of living. So that was disproven in the Supreme Court. So now they're saying the exact opposite. No, they're living in the caves because you're destroying their villages, so they have to live in caves. So either it's your traditional way of living, or it's the exact opposite. Either way, it's a fake story. It's a false narrative. It's a blood libel that was created in order to take over strategic territory and to really, really slander the state of Israel and every Jewish person living over the Green Line, and by extension, the IDF that is here to protect them. We have a very carefully fully documented history of what the real story is, when these outposts were created, and by whom, and you will see it for yourselves. Let's go.
Just to be sure, so this is the firing area. In front
Everything you're seeing.
Yeah, and these buildings.
The villages of
yes, that they are illegally built.
Every single one.
Okay, that's correct.
Yeah, every single one.